The colonel's face was chalk white. His eyes, wide with a sudden profound shock, locked onto me, looking right past my father's retired rank and my brother's polished uniform. He snapped to rigid attention, a posture more severe than any general would receive. "My God," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Ma'am, are you the widow of SEAL Team 9? My brother Mark and my father just froze. Their condescending smirks, the ones they'd been wearing all morning, vanished. They were replaced by a blank, slack-jawed confusion. "Widow?" Mark stammered, looking at our father. "What is he talking about?" They were completely, utterly lost. The reckoning had been building for years, but the fuse was truly lit 2 days earlier. We were all at my father's home, ostensibly planning our attendance for General Pace's retirement ceremony, a major event on the base. This was my father's world. My father, Colonel Rhett Robert Jensen, is a man completely and totally obsessed with his own legacy, which he saw embodied entirely in his son. And then there was my brother, Lieutenant Mark Jensen, the family's eternal golden child, who wore his rank like a costume he'd been handed, not one he'd ever actually earned. My father was proudly polishing a medal on Mark's dress uniform, his voice booming with pride. "Mark, you'll be at the very important person briefing with me. It's good for you to be seen by the flag officers." His chest puffed out, already picturing his heir shaking hands, cementing the Jensen legacy. Then, that heavy, dismissive gaze landed on me, standing by the door. "Catherine," he said, his tone laced with that familiar, gentle pity. "Are you sure you're coming? It's a formal military affair." He gestured vaguely at me, as if my very presence was confusing. "Your little desk job at the shipyard? Well, it doesn't really prepare you for this." Mark, ever the echo, scoffed. "Yeah, Cat, try not to bore the generals with stories about your spreadsheets. Maybe just wait in the car?" I gripped my phone in my pocket, my knuckles white. A familiar cold fury settled deep in my stomach, the same feeling I got when they forgot my university. Honors convocation, but through Mark a week-long party for passing a basic physical fitness test. My spreadsheets, I thought, were the kill-capture logs for Operation Nightshade. They didn't know I wasn't just invited. I was requested. General Pace himself had asked for me to be there, but I just smiled. That polite, empty smile I'd perfected over 20 years. "I'll be there. Don't worry about me." They chuckled, thinking I was their tag-along, their civilian embarrassment. They had no idea I was the one General Pace had cleared for the command brief. To understand the reckoning that was coming, you have to understand the two lives I was living. In my family's world, I was shipyard cat. Sometimes, just the admin. I was the footnote. I remember a family barbecue last summer. I'd just come off a brutal 72-hour shift, running on stale coffee and adrenaline, but I showed up. My brother Mark was holding court by the grill, beer in hand, waving around a framed certificate. It was a letter of appreciation. A thank you note. My father clinked his bottle against Mark's. "That's the Jensen legacy," he boomed. "Men in the arena." I was standing by the potato salad, just trying to feel human. I tried to join in. "That's great, Mark. I actually just got a new certification myself." I started to say. My father didn't even turn around. He just waved a hand dismissively. "That's nice, honey. Mark, tell them about the live fire exercise." And just like that, I was invisible, erased. It was the story of my life. My master's degree was nice, while Mark's C+ was a real turning point. It was always like this. But Shipyard Cat wasn't my real life. My real life took place in a windowless room, a place my family couldn't even imagine. A skiff, a sensitive compartmented information facility The only light came from glowing tactical maps and data streams. The air was cold, silent, and recycled. This was my arena. My boss wasn't my father. My boss was Commander Reese, a grizzled, brilliant strategist who didn't care about my last name, only my last analysis. He trusted me. And in our world, trust is the only currency that matters. I was in that very room, just hours before that barbecue. The tension was thick. Reese slid a headset over, his eyes locked on a blinking red dot. "Cat," he said, his voice flat. "ST-9 is walking into a trap. The asset is compromised. Intel's bad." "What's the call?" "There's no committee. There's no, let me check with my dad." "There is only the call." I didn't blink. "Authorize Widow's protocol," I said, my voice as calm as his. "Reroute them to exfil point Gamma. I want our ISR bird spinning up now. I am red lighting their primary target. Get me a direct line to the team lead." Reese just nodded. He didn't question it. He executed. In that room, my word was final. That call sign, Widow's protocol, was mine. It's what the SEALs called me. Not Cat. Not the admin. They called me the Widow. It wasn't because I'd lost someone. It was because my real job was primary fleet ops intelligence handler for SEAL Team 9. My strategic planning was so lethal, so precise, that I made widows of the enemy. I built the box, they closed the lid. They didn't just respect me, they feared my authority. Because when I made a call, it meant their lives. I'd go from that world of life and death back to my father's house, and the whiplash was staggering. He cornered me once in the kitchen, that same look of pity in his eyes. "You know, Catherine, I'm proud you work for the Navy. It's good. But Mark," he'd sigh, like he was explaining a complex truth. "He's on the front lines. He's a warrior, like I was. Your support role is vital. But you have to understand, it's just not the same." I just nodded. What was I supposed to say? "Dad, your warrior son's front line is a supply depot, and my support role just saved an entire team?" For years, I let them believe it. It was easier. It kept my world separate, safe from their judgment. But when Mark tried to use his unearned rank to humiliate me at General Pace's retirement, he wasn't just insulting me. He was breaking protocol in front of men who knew my real call sign. It was time to close the gap between their narrative and my reality. The night before the ceremony, I sat in my quiet apartment, and I felt, still, the usual sting of their words, the hot pulse of anger that always followed one of their dismissals. It was just gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't setting some elaborate, intricate trap. I just made a decision. I was going to stop hiding. I would simply show up, as myself, and I would follow actual protocol. I knew, with the certainty of a well-run intelligence op, that they would be the ones to defy it. Their arrogance was a predictable variable. I could already see it playing out in my mind. I saw Mark, his chest puffed out in his dress uniform, trying to pull rank. He hadn't earned to get into the very important person command briefing, an area he wasn't remotely cleared for. I saw my father, leaning heavily on his retired status, talking about legacy and old times to bypass a rule he thought was beneath him. They saw protocol as something for little people. Not for them. I picked up my phone and made one call. To Commander Reese, my CO, who was handling the high-level liaison for General Pace's event. "Reese," I said, keeping my voice level. "Just confirming. I'm on the access list for the Ops Center brief, correct?" There was a pause on the line. "You're not just on the list, Widow," he said, his voice gravelly and all business. "You're presenting the Operation Nightshade after-action brief." General Pace insisted. He paused again, sensing the real question. Why? My family will be there, I said, my voice flat. They are not on the list. The silence on the line was long, but it wasn't confusion. It was understanding. I could practically hear the slow, grim smile spread across his face. Understood, ma'am, he said, the respect in his tone a shield. Protocol will be strictly enforced. That was all I needed. The trap wasn't complicated. It was just their pride versus a system they didn't understand, and I knew exactly who the post commander was. Colonel Evans, a man who had co-run a joint task force with me for 6 brutal months, a man who intimately knew my call sign, who had seen my strategic work, but had never once seen my face. While they were shining their shoes and pressing their uniforms, I packed my bag. Just jeans, a simple blouse. I looked at my nondescript civilian DoD ID, the one that got me onto the shipyard. Then I tucked my real badge deep into my wallet, the classified, red-bordered one, the one that spoke a language they couldn't even read. I didn't need a complex strategy. I just needed to be myself, in their world, for the first time. I drove to the base, my family's condescending texts pinging on my phone. They had no idea they weren't just walking into a retirement party. They were walking into my office. We arrived at the entrance to the Secure Command Operations Center, and the atmosphere was thick with authority. The hallway was a sea of dress uniforms, flag officers, admirals, and generals all speaking in the low, serious tones of men who were used to being listened to. And then there was us. My father, Colonel Jensen Sr., and my brother, Lieutenant Mark Jensen, were absolutely preening. They moved through the crowd like they owned the place, soaking in the ambient power. They belonged, and I, in my jeans and a simple blouse, was the visible stain on their perfect picture. My father's eyes landed on me, and his face tightened with a familiar, weary disgust. He pulled me aside, his voice a sharp hiss. "Catherine, for heaven's sake, you look like a contractor." He looked around, as if afraid someone would see us talking. "Just stay in the back, and please don't embarrass us." I felt that old, familiar coldness settle in my chest. This was the man who hadn't bothered to come to my master's degree convocation because Mark had a minor baseball game, and I was the embarrassment. I just nodded, my face a polite, blank mask. Mark, ever the opportunist, immediately spotted the main event. A heavy, reinforced steel door with a glowing red sign above it, restricted area, ops briefing, active TS clearance only. His eyes lit up. This was it. The inner sanctum. This was where the men in the arena, as my father loved to say, went to do their secret, important work. He turned to me, a smug, condescending smirk spreading across his face, and he made sure to say it loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "This is where the real work happens, Kat. You wait out here with the spouses, okay? Try to look busy." He actually winked at me, then turned and marched up to the young Marine sergeant standing guard. He puffed out his chest, every inch the legacy. "Lieutenant Mark Jensen. My father and I are here for the briefing." The Marine sergeant, who looked about 19 and completely unimpressed, held up a tablet. He tapped the screen a few times, then looked up with a blank, professional face. "Sir, your name is not on the access list." He glanced at my father. "Neither is Colonel Jensen's. This area is restricted." My father's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. This wasn't just a denial. It was a public humiliation. Mark just scoffed, like the sergeant was a child who'd made a silly mistake. "Son," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is Colonel Robert Jensen, retired, and I am an active lieutenant. We are General Pace's personal guests. Now, step aside." My father chimed in, his voice a low growl that used to make me flinch. "Sergeant, you clearly don't understand the meaning of legacy." I couldn't listen to it anymore. It was just pathetic. I let out a slow, quiet breath and stepped forward, moving past my sputtering father and my indignant brother. The sergeant immediately shifted, putting a firm hand up to bar my way. He was polite, but his eyes were steel. "Ma'am, this area is restricted to active personnel only." He eyed my jeans with a practiced, neutral expression. I gave him a small, tired smirk. "Still am," I said. He blinked. Just a flicker of confusion. "Which branch? Navy? Fleet Ops?" Before he could even process that, the secure door hissed open and a man stepped out, a full-bird colonel, his chest covered in ribbons. He saw the commotion and his brow furrowed. Mark immediately pounced, seeing his salvation. "Colonel, thank God. Tell your man here." But the colonel wasn't looking at Mark. His eyes went right past my brother, past my father, and landed directly on me. And he froze. It was Colonel Evans, a man I knew only through encrypted video calls at 3 a.m. and curt, all-caps messages on secure channels. He'd never seen my face, but he saw something. He saw the one person who shouldn't be here. Or maybe the one person who should. His entire military bearing, decades of command and control, snapped into place. He went from relaxed to rigid, parade ground attention in a millisecond. His face drained of all color. "My God," he whispered, his voice hushed, filled with a sudden, dawning awe that silenced the entire hallway. "Ma'am, I didn't know you were... Wait." His eyes widened as the pieces clicked into place. Are you the widow of SEAL Team 9? Absolute silence. You could hear a pin drop on the marble floor. My father's jaw dropped open. Mark's face just crumpled. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated, childish disbelief. "What?" Mark stammered, looking from the colonel to me and back again. "Widow? Cat, what is this? That's a call sign, that's a legend." I ignored him. I looked directly at Colonel Evans, my entire demeanor shifting from shipyard cat to the woman he knew me to be. "All business." "I am, Colonel," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the sudden quiet. "Is General Pace ready for my brief on Operation Nightshade?" Evans blinked, as if I'd slapped him. "Yes, ma'am. Right this way. My apologies for the delay." He grabbed the heavy secure door and held it open for me. The young Marine sergeant, his eyes now wide as saucers, snapped to attention for me. I walked through the door, into the cold, dark room where I belonged, but I paused, just for a second, and looked back at my stunned, speechless family. I gave them that same empty, polite smile. "You two wait here," I said. "This area is restricted." My father had spent my entire life teaching me the importance of rank. In the end, it only took 6 words from a stranger for him to finally learn who outranked who. Inside that room, the world shifted. The air was cold, and the only sound was the low hum of servers. I stood there, in my jeans, in front of a U-shaped table of generals and admirals, and I briefed them. I spoke about Operation Nightshade, about signal intercepts, asset compromises, and kill chain authorizations. I used the language of my real life, and they listened. They didn't just listen, they leaned in. They asked sharp, focused questions. General Pace, a man my father spoke of with near religious awe, nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on me, soaking in every word. In that room, I wasn't shipyard cat. I wasn't the admin. I was the expert. I was the authority. After the formal brief, General Pace asked me to stay. He shook my hand, his grip firm and his respect palpable. "The widow," he said, his voice quiet. "Your analysis saved ST9. The country is in your debt for that." He then presented me with a small, heavy box. Inside was a classified commendation, a medal I could never, ever show my family. I held it in my palm, its weight a stark contrast to the flimsy, framed Letter of appreciation, my brother had paraded around at that barbecue. This was real. This was earned in silence. Later, I caught a glimpse of them through the reinforced glass of the command center door. My father and my brother. They were just standing awkwardly in the public hallway. Two more uniforms in a sea of people, completely ignored. They were outsiders, their faces a mixture of confusion, humiliation, and a dawning, terrible understanding. They had been so desperate to get in, and they had been rendered completely irrelevant. They weren't the Jensen legacy. They were just two men, waiting by the door. A year later. Things are different. My world is different. The plaque on my door doesn't say Cat. It says Ops Commander K. Jensen. I lead my own task force now. I'm no longer just the voice on a secure line. I'm the one who builds the operations. My office overlooks a bustling, state-of-the-art command floor. This is my true home. My new family is the team that sits at that table with me. It's Commander Reese, who now works for me. His grizzled smile a sign of pure professional respect. It's the new lead for ST9, who calls me ma'am and means it. This is a family built on competence, on mutual trust, and on a fierce, shared loyalty. It's not the dysfunctional obligation I grew up with. It's real. This morning, an envelope was on my desk. It was heavy, cream-colored, personal stationery, not standard military mail. The handwriting on the front was shaky, but I recognized it instantly. It was from my father. I sat there for a long time, just looking at it. I didn't feel dread or anger or even curiosity. I just felt distant. I opened it. The letter inside was short, the handwriting even shakier. Catherine, it read, I have made inquiries. The few things I was cleared to learn about your service are significant. The men at the general ceremony spoke of you in terms I have only ever heard used for true heroes. I was wrong. I read that line twice. I was wrong. Words I had waited my entire childhood to hear. Words that, I realized, no longer held any power over me. My definition of legacy was too small, he continued. I am proud. Colonel R. Jensen. Ret. I read the letter one more time. I felt not triumph, not forgiveness. Just closure. It was an acknowledgement, a correction to a file, but it didn't define me. My peace was no longer tied to his apology. His pride was no longer something I needed to earn. I calmly folded the letter, slid it into a simple desk drawer labeled personal, and closed it. My screen lit up. A new critical operation was pending authorization. I turned back to my work, my focus absolute. My brother wanted to inherit a legacy, and my father wanted to bestow one. They both learned that a true legacy isn't on your uniform. It's in the work you do in silence, and have acknowledged in public. If you've ever had your quiet competence overlooked, share your story in the comments. In this community, we always recognize the real operator in the room.